Hello, this is Robbie Mitchell here from Head on the Cloud Development. Today I'm going to walk you through how to use TypeScript in a NetSuite SDF Account Customization project. The goals of this video are to show you how to set up an SDF Account Customization project in WebStorm, to demonstrate how to use TypeScript for your SuiteScripts, and then I'm going to show you how to use promises in a user event script and talk about the benefits of asynchronous coding. So what do you need to know to get started? This video is intended for NetSuite developers and administrators. You should have the administrator role in NetSuite to do everything I cover here. You should be at least familiar with JavaScript and basic web technologies here. For the coding environment, I'm going to be using WebStorm. It is worth mentioning that NetSuite has a brand new official plugin out now for VS Code as well. I've tried the new VS Code plugin, and I still prefer WebStorm, mainly because you get more of a user interface. But if you love to use the command line, then the VS Code route may be best for you. Let's talk about one thing before we get any farther. Anyone who knows me knows that for the past decade we've been using our own custom uploader module to automatically upload our SuiteScripts into NetSuite. The HITC uploader was around long before SDF, and you've probably seen demos using it in other videos. So are we abandoning that and going purely to SDF here? Not a chance. Not yet, anyway. SDF is getting much better with every NetSuite release, and there are distinct advantages to both systems at this point. When you're embarking on a new project, you should think about which one to use. One thing that drives me crazy with the SDF system is how NetSuite account access is managed. I have access to a lot of NetSuite accounts, and I think the account selection process there is clumsy. I'm constantly worried about accidentally picking the wrong account. It's just way too easy. Second, if your project is primarily SuiteScripts and not very dependent on UI objects, then our uploader is probably going to give you a smoother experience. Third, if you need to be able to quickly update individual script files and deploy them across sandbox and production environments, then ours again makes this process easier. The challenge I run into with SDF here is that if you have a really large project, it can sometimes take 20 minutes to deploy it. And so if I just want to update a single script in production and sandbox, the only way to do that, as far as I know, is to switch your default account, which is annoying. So on the other hand, if your project does rely on a lot of UI objects that you want to include as XML and manage in code, then that is exactly what an SDF project exists for. And let's say you're an employee working at a company managing their NetSuite account, then you certainly won't have the account management struggles that I have here. And finally, regarding uploading single files, SDF does support it, but only to the main preferred account on the project. So I hope this gives you some information to make well-informed decisions with. Let's dive into our example scenario now. Let's first talk about what we want to accomplish. Let's say that we want to add a custom field to our customer record that stores the total value of their sales. There are a few ways you can do this, and I probably would not recommend the way that we're going to do it here in this video, but this will nonetheless be a good example scenario to demonstrate the technologies in question here. That being said, the way we're going to do this is to set up a user event script that runs whenever a sales order is saved that'll recalculate the customer's total sales amount. And to store the value, I've gone ahead and created the custom field here. Let's get into WebStorm and create a project around this now. So in WebStorm, I went to New Project, and I'm going to select Account Customization. I'm going to call it Calculate Total Sales. And I'm going to put it in my Documents folder. So here's what our project shell looks like. Now first, let's import this custom field that we created in the UI. First, I need to go to my settings and set my preferred NetSuite account that this project is linked to. I'm going to set it here. Okay, there we go. So now the NetSuite menu here should link to my account that I'm operating in. So to import an object, we need to right-click on the Objects folder and go to NetSuite, Import Objects from Account. And now we can select the type. And I know I'm looking for a custom entity field, so I'm just going to pull up the list of all of them here. And here's my total sales field. So I'll go ahead and import that. Okay, great. So here's the XML file representing our custom field. So now let's work on creating our user event script. We can create it by right-clicking on the Objects folder and going to New, Custom Object. For object type, you can choose Script, User Event. We'll set it to Sales Order Calc Total. We'll set the script name to Sales Order Calculate Total Sales. And we'll set the record type it's deployed to Sales Order. Now if you're not sure how to set this up like I just did, you can set it up in the UI and just import it like I did with the custom entity field here. So next we need to make our script file. So you can see that our project structure has a SuiteScripts folder here within the file cabinet. That's where our compiled JavaScript files are going to end up. For TypeScript, let's collapse that file cabinet folder for a minute and right-click on the source folder and add a new folder called TypeScripts. Now in that folder, let's create a TypeScript called Sales Order Calc Totals UE. So now we can set up the script header file comment here, and then we'll pause to do a bit of setup. There's just a couple of files we need to create here to make TypeScript work the way we need it to for SuiteScripts. First, we need to create a package.json file. So right-click on your project header and do New, Package.json file. In our package.json file, we just need to add a couple of dev dependencies here. We're going to add our head in the cloud NetSuite types reference so that we can have TypeScript IntelliSense for the entire SuiteScript 2 API. So to do that, enter in @hitc NetSuite types. It should be the first one that comes up. And for the version, just press the caret symbol and the latest version should come up automatically like it has here. The other module we want to add here is TypeScript. Again, you can just use the latest version. For me, it's 4.5.2. So after we have those, we can click this Run npm install link that WebStorm gives us. Okay, that's done. Next, we need to create a tsconfig.json file. So again, let's do that from the project root menu. And let's adjust a few things here. We're going to set the module to AMD because that's what SuiteScripts are based on. We're going to set the target to ES 2020. This is important because this is the version of JavaScript that compiling our TypeScript is going to generate. If you're still working in SuiteScript 2.0 opposed to 2.1, you're probably going to need to reduce this down to ES5 because that's what the old NetSuite servers can understand. But in my testing here in NetSuite 2021.2, usually we're okay to use a newer version like ES 2020. But again, if it doesn't work for you, just adjust it down to an earlier version. One of the biggest benefits of using later versions is that the compiled JavaScript looks nicer in case you find yourself debugging it in the browser instead of using nice clean TypeScript. We're going to set source map to false. We don't need that. Next, we're going to set a base URL. Now we need to add the paths that we care about. And finally, we're going to set our outdir to source file cabinet SuiteScripts. Okay, Now let's go back to our TypeScript file itself. Now if you've seen any of my other videos on TypeScript, you'll recognize the way we start off the script. We do it exactly the same way here in SDF. We're going to be using the after submit script entry point here. And let's start with the simplest possible thing here, an execution log. Now, I don't like pointless warnings, so let's tell WebStorm not to warn us about unused global functions like this. I'm going to go to WebStorm Preferences, and go to the editor and inspections. Let's type in unused globals and turn that off. There we go. Now we have a green check mark. It's always a good place to start. So now let's compile this script. The way we compile an SDF project is simply to enter TSC in the terminal. And after that, we should end up with a JavaScript file in our SuiteScripts directory here. You can take a look at it here if you want. So now let's update our user event script object to reference this file that we've created. I'll also set my deployment ID here. Now we can deploy this project to NetSuite to do a simple test. I'm just going to say deploy. So we should get a blue confirmation that it's deployed successfully. Now let's try it out in NetSuite. First, let's find our script in the interface here. Here it is. And now let's just edit and save an existing sales order to test it. This one should work. I'm just going to save it. And here's our execution log. Great, so far so good. Let's get back to the code and keep developing. Alright, now again, our goal is to update the customer total sales value whenever a sales order is saved. So first, let's set the script to run when someone creates, edits, or deletes a sales order. To do this, I'm going to use the array.includes method that you can use now in SuiteScript 2.1. So now let's identify who the customer is. And next we're going to find all the sales orders for this customer. So let's initialize a totals variable to 0 here. Now before we can do a search, we obviously need to import the search module. Now let's set up our search. And while we're here, let's add in some logging with timestamps so we can see how long it takes to do each step here. So now for each sales order, we're going to load the record and get the total. And let me warn you, if you were doing this for real, you would not need to load the record. You can just get the total from a result here. But I'm doing this to demonstrate one of the benefits of asynchronous processing. So we'll come back to this in a minute. So here we'll iterate through our results. Again, we're going to include logs with timestamps so we can track the speed of this. Now to load the sales order, I need the record module. And finally, we'll increment our total variable here. Okay, now let's deploy this and do a quick test. I'll run TSC to compile it. And notice now that I'm updating a single file, I can right-click on the file and go to NetSuite Upload File to Account. Okay, so let's test that. So to test, I'm just going to edit and save the same sales order again. And now look, we have 47 sales orders for this customer. So we started loading at 6 seconds past the minute. And we finished at 35 seconds past the minute. So it took about 29 seconds to load all these sales orders. And that's actually pretty good. A lot of NetSuite accounts would be slower than that. But let's see if we can make it even faster. So in SuiteScript 2.1, we can use promises in user event scripts. What that enables us to do here is effectively load all the sales orders at the same time instead of one after the other like we're doing now. I'll show you how. So what we're going to do first is turn this sales order load operation into a promise. All I have to do is put a .promise right here. Now if I mouse over this sales order variable, we see that it's no longer simply a sales order object, but a promise of a sales order. So what we need to do now is make an array to store all these promises in, like this. And now we'll put the sales order load promise into the array like this. And then what we need to do is come down and say that after we've finished loading all the sales orders, we can do the processing. To do that, we'll use promise.all. And now finally, let's add in the bit for updating the customer record. Now let's deploy and test this. So now if we edit and save the same sales order again, let's watch the performance logs and see if it goes any faster. So now we see them loading at pretty much the same time. It's loading 2 or 3 per second, which should be quite a bit faster. So this time we started loading at 17 seconds past the minute, and we finished at 38 seconds. So it came down to 21 seconds. So that cuts off a significant amount of processing time here, and the impact would be much greater in slower NetSuite accounts. And that's the power of asynchronous processing. And that concludes the demonstration. I hope you can see now that if you have a project that you'd like to do using SDF, you can rest assured that you can still use all the glory of TypeScript. So feel free to get in touch if you have any questions, and thank you for watching. We'll see you at SuiteWorld.